Welcome everyone to the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada Conference and Trade Show. I'm Michael Mancini, Editor-in-Chief of Canada Export, the e-magazine and podcast of the Canadian Trade Commissioner's Service. I invite you to stop by every hour or so to hear what our entrepreneurs have to say about their business and this important sector. Now, I'd like to welcome my next guest, Mr. Pierre Gaucher, General Manager and VP with GDD Instrumentation. Thank you very much for taking this time today.
Thank you very much, sir.
So first of all, tell me about your company and your role.
Well, GDD Instrumentation exists since 1976, where it started with my father and two associates called Régis Desbiens and Régent Desbiens. They sort of started the company with the belief that they could sort of put some instruments on the market that will give people into the exploration and mining some advantage, cost advantage, so that they be more competitive in doing some surveys or either on surface or underground.
Okay.
And basically it started small and now we're sort of exporting all around the globe, and in Mongolia, in China, in Australia, South America. And we're sort of that are based on electromagnetic, which is like a metal detector.
Yeah.
So we got very small device for the core, some that you could put in probe on the ground, some that you could pull behind a man. Mm-hmm. We got other type of equipment called IP or induced polarization that would help people to find gold deposit or copper deposit disseminated. We got other stuff called the chain level. It's to define the vertical height when you have obstacles like mountains or vegetation, and you don't want to cut that. So all those give some cost advantage, and that's what basically we do, and we sort of listen a lot to the customer, what they want to have, and adapt. So we're sort of perceived into the market as innovators.
Right. Now, you obviously are international at this point.
Yes.
How important is your international presence, and what proportion of your business is actually international?
Well, it's pretty big. Like, it's close to about 60% of our manufacturing is going outside of Canada. And it's pretty important.
So tell me about some of the challenges that your company faces. Obviously they're varied and they depend on the markets, but tell me about what some of the major challenges are for your company.
I would say language is, there's a barrier with the language. There's the values, different values, different countries. There's the equipment that you have to adapt, different voltage, for instance, 120, 240, 240. You have the adaptation of the equipment, translation of the instruction manual. Yeah. These are all sort of challenges that we have to overcome.
Yeah. And how do you overcome those?
Well, you sort of adapt based on the importance. If you got a big contract somewhere, you sort of say, well, okay, what can I do to do it better, to make it easier for the customer? That's mainly the idea. Yeah. Simple things sometimes. Translate a few lines within the code of the instruments, like within a PDA, will make a big difference for some customers. Other times, simply making some small adaptation in terms of the software to adapt the equipment to the customer. It varies from one country to the other. And the challenge also, like sometimes it's simply to better understand and use a local reseller or a contractor.
Now, your company is active in China and in Russia as well. Tell me about some of the differences that you experience in those two countries.
Well, in China, for instance, my son was there not long ago in Beijing, and while he was preparing to make a presentation, one of the points the local representative made sure he understood was that within the presentation he had to be very sharp, very determined when he was sort of suggesting a product within our range of products. So he had not to say, well, this is something that you may want to use. It was something like more, this is the product you need to use. That is the solution to your problem.
So how would that differ then? So they wanted a direct approach in China.
They want a direct approach. That's the only way it will work. Otherwise, it's too soft.
Ah, interesting.
While in Russia, when I was there, I made a contact, and that person was supposed to meet me. So we set up a meeting, say early in the morning, 10 o'clock. Well, I wait all day because I was not enough affirmative in the way I say, well, this meeting has to be at 10 o'clock. Are you going to be at that hotel at that time specifically? Another example, I tried to reach somebody and to get like an accord that within the demonstration time I would be on site, that would be prolonging or staying a little bit longer. Well, I learned 5 minutes before leaving that they want me to stay, but I always try directly, while the way to do it was to use the consulate or the ambassade, where the ambassador, not the ambassador, but the representative of the Canadian government had direct link and were recognized by local Russian people. While myself, being a new somebody new that they didn't know, they were not sure whether I was really the person.
I want to talk a little more about that because you're going into now the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service, which is both at our regional offices across Canada and at our embassies and consulates abroad. Tell me about the help that you've received from our Canadian Trade Commissioners.
Well, the trade commissioners could help you define like who are the person that you should be getting in contact locally because they know the local person. So it helped the business not losing too much time to direct your attention to which person, who is active, what is going on, is there any project locally going on. So within the mining, they could sort of point you to the local contractor. What you may think is the important person may not be the one you think, but locally they will know that. In the same way the values, the way things are going, a little bit like in Russia, there's ways of doing things. Well, in Africa, there's some ways that in the end could be a lot easier if you're aware of it, and these people could help you.
Yeah. What value do you see in it? Canadian companies get help from a lot of different organizations in government and outside government. At the end of the day, though, the help that you receive from the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service, you mentioned a little bit, it saves you time. Ultimately, what value does it provide to your company?
Well, if you're able to finalize the sales, then it's a great value. Like it's difficult to put a value in terms of money, but not having those aspects, and even on the side there's lots of information about the values, the country, how to do it, the habits, how to shake hands, how to present your business card. Those are simple things, but if you don't do it correctly, even before you start to sell, you're not you're out. So it's important. Those small things in the end, marketing is all about relationship. So you cannot impose the way you're dealing in Canada to somebody from outside. You have to accept that you'll have to adapt to some different countries, different values, different approach, and the more you know about your customer, the better you are.
Yeah. On a final note, what advice would you offer other Canadian companies who maybe aren't as international as GDD Instrumentation? What advice would you offer?
Well, start small, test your market a lot. Don't get on the international if you haven't tested your equipment properly locally. We tend to test and retest, and even if we test a lot, there's still some bugs. Be open to modify and adapt to the comments. If you get a comment, listen, make sure you understand correctly what was the comment, and overcome. Keep going.
Thank you very much for taking this time today.
Thank you very much, sir.